My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, and 3 months ago, I thought I had it all: a beautiful home in Charleston, a husband who was charming, successful, and endlessly persuasive, and a future that looked bright enough to blind me from the truth hiding right under my nose. But that morning, the morning everything shattered, Ruddy woke up to an empty bed. No good morning text, no coffee brewing in the kitchen. Just silence. Then I saw it, a single white envelope taped to the fridge, my name written in his handwriting. Sarah. Inside were divorce papers. No explanation, no apology. Just a cold signature at the bottom and a note that said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The house, the car, and everything inside it are legally mine. You'll be fine." I stared at those words until they blurred. My knees gave out. My body trembled. The man I'd loved for 12 years, Mark, had thrown me out of my own home like yesterday's trash. I didn't even know he'd filed. He'd done it behind my back. Quietly, smartly, ruthlessly. And the worst part, he'd made sure I got nothing. By the time I called my lawyer, the papers were already stamped by the court. The prenup I'd signed years ago, trusting him completely, was airtight. He planned this. I was blindsided, humiliated, and homeless within a week. The friends who used to come for wine nights suddenly got busy. My own sister said, "You'll bounce back. You always do." But I wasn't sure I could this time. So there I was sitting in my old Toyota Corolla in a Walmart parking lot, clutching a duffel bag full of everything I owned, crying so hard I could barely breathe. And that's when a car pulled up beside me. A black Mercedes, windows tinted. A man stepped out. Middle-aged, grey suit, sharp eyes. He looked straight at me and said, "Excuse me, are you Sarah Mitchell?" I froze. He smiled faintly. "You need to come with me. It's urgent. You've just inherited something, $38 million, to be exact." I laughed through my tears. "You've got the wrong woman." But he didn't smile this time. "No, ma'am. Your ex-husband, Mark, passed away last night." I felt my heart stop. Dead? How? When? And why? Why would I be the one inheriting anything? If you're watching this, tell me where you're from in the comments, hit like, and subscribe, because this story is about how I went from broken and betrayed to uncovering a secret that turned my entire life upside down. Because Mark's death, it wasn't an accident. I didn't believe him. Not at first. When you're living out of your car and someone walks up claiming you just inherited $38 million, you assume it's a scam or a cruel joke. But the man, his name was David Lang. A corporate attorney from Atlanta, looked deadly serious. His voice was steady, his gaze direct. He even showed me his ID and business card embossed with gold letters. Still, my instinct screamed run. "Look," I said, wiping my face, "if this is some kind of prank, you picked the wrong week to mess with me." He nodded calmly. "I understand how this sounds, Miss Mitchell, but your ex-husband, Mark, passed away last night in a car crash near Savannah. His estate named you as the sole beneficiary." My heart dropped. "Mark's dead?" "Yes, and his assets are extensive: multiple business accounts, real estate, offshore holdings, all totaling $38 million, give or take. But before you can access any of it, there are certain conditions you need to understand." Conditions? Of course there were conditions. David gestured toward his car. "Please, come with me to the firm. We'll go through everything together. I promise you're safe." I hesitated. My reflection in his tinted window looked small and broken. A woman who'd lost everything: her marriage, her home, her dignity. I didn't know if I could handle another lie, but something in his eyes felt sincere. Or maybe I was just desperate for something to believe in again. I got in the car. The ride was quiet. Rain hit the windshield in soft, steady taps. The air smelled like expensive leather and aftershave. I stared out the window, numb, replaying Mark's name in my head like a haunting song. Mark, my husband, my betrayer, my ghost. I asked quietly, "Was anyone else in the car with him?" David paused. "No, but there was an odd detail about the crash. The police are still investigating." My stomach tightened. "What kind of detail?" He didn't answer right away. "Let's just say someone tampered with the vehicle." I turned to face him. "You think someone killed him?" He exhaled. "It's a possibility. And if I'm right, you may not be safe either." I stared at him, stunned. The betrayal I'd suffered only days ago suddenly felt small compared to this new storm I was walking into. When we reached his office, I saw my name already printed on an official-looking file. Sarah Mitchell, primary beneficiary. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside wasn't just legal paperwork. There were photos. Of Mark, of another woman, of places I didn't recognize, and one photo that made my blood run cold. It was taken 2 days before the crash. And Mark wasn't alone. He was meeting with my former best friend, Jessica, and she was holding his hand. If you think that's bad, wait until you hear what I discovered next. Asterisk, I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that picture, Jessica's manicured hand wrapped around Mark's, my best friend, my bridesmaid, the woman who once held my hair back when I cried over him, and now she'd been with him. By morning, David called. The funeral's today, he said. Private ceremony. You should be there. Why? I asked flatly. He left me for dead, he sighed. Because it's the right thing to do, and because everyone who might have wanted Mark gone will be there. That line chilled me. So I went. The church was small but elegant, filled with people in black designer suits. I felt like an intruder, standing at the back, while whispers followed me like smoke. There she was, Jessica, dressed head to toe in Dior, crocodile tears streaming down her face as she hugged Mark's business partner, Daniel Price, the same Daniel who used to have lunch with Mark every Friday. They both looked too close. David leaned toward me and whispered, "That's Daniel, Mark's second in command." They ran the logistics firm together. I nodded, keeping my eyes on Jessica. Her tears looked fake, her sorrow rehearsed. Then Daniel spotted me. His face tightened. He muttered something to Jessica, and she turned, locking eyes with me. For a split second, her mask slipped. Pure panic flashed across her face. And then she smiled. A sweet, poisonous smile. "Sarah, oh my God, you came? I'm so sorry for your loss." I wanted to slap that fake sympathy right off her face. But instead, I just said, "Funny, you don't look very heartbroken." Her smile twitched. "Mark loved you, you know. Even at the end." I stepped closer. "Really? Is that why he was holding your hand 2 days before he died?" Her face turned pale. She froze. David cleared his throat softly. "Sarah, maybe not the time." I turned away, trembling with fury. The room suddenly felt like it was closing in on me. Everyone's eyes, everyone's whispers. I wanted to run, but as I reached the door, I overheard something that stopped me cold. Daniel was speaking quietly to the priest. "Everything's going according to plan. Once the transfer clears, we'll handle the rest." Double quotes, transfer. The word sliced through me. What transfer? Mark's estate. The money that was now supposedly mine. I turned to David. "You heard that, right?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, and that's why you can't trust anyone in this room." I looked back at Jessica, still playing the grieving widow she never was. And for the first time since the divorce, I felt something other than pain. I felt rage. If Mark was dead and Jessica was hiding something, I was going to find out exactly what. Because no one betrays me and walks away clean. You think you know betrayal. You haven't seen anything yet. Asterisk. The will reading took place 2 days later in a downtown law office overlooking the Charleston Harbor. The sky outside was grey, almost metallic, and the waves below crashed against the docks like the world itself was angry. I was angry to. David had arranged everything. "It's a formal reading," he said, straight unning his tie. "You, Jessica, and Daniel are the primary attendees. But stay quiet, observe, and don't react no matter what you hear." "Why?" I asked. He hesitated. "Because I believe your ex-husband's will was changed recently, illegally." That hit me like a punch to the chest. Inside the conference room, I saw Jessica sitting across from me, legs crossed, nails painted blood red. Daniel sat beside her, pretending to check his phone. Their body language screamed alliance. The executor, a polished woman named Linda, began to read. Her voice was professional but flat, as if she'd done this 1,000 times. "I, Mark William Mitchell, being of sound mind, do hereby leave my estate as follows." Jessica smiled faintly. "To my former wife, Sarah Mitchell, I leave my personal residence, all business assets, and all liquid accounts, totaling $38 million. The room went dead silent. Jessica's face drained of color. Daniel's phone slipped from his hand. I blinked. "I am sorry, what?" Linda repeated it, firm and clear. You, Mrs. Mitchell, are the sole heir. David smirked slightly beside me. Like he'd been waiting for this moment, Jessica stood, her voice rising. That's impossible. Mark changed his will. I was there when she froze mid-sentence. Everyone stared at her. David's tone turned sharp. When what, Miss Carter? When you helped him? Or when you forged it? Jessica's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked at Daniel for help, but he was already backing away. My heart pounded in my chest. For once, I had the power. Linda continued, ignoring the tension. All properties, assets, and holdings will transfer to Mrs. Mitchell within 14 business days. Pending standard verification, Jessica grabbed her purse and stormed out. Muttering something under her breath, David leaned closer to me. That reaction? Exactly what I needed to see. She's hiding something, and now we know it's connected to the will. I exhaled shakily. So what do we do now? He smiled slightly. We dig, quietly. If she tampered with Mark's documents, she may also know what really happened the night he died. I stared out the window at the storm rolling in over the harbour. Mark was gone. Jessica was unravelling. And the truth was starting to surface, dark and dangerous, for the first time in months. I felt a spark of something I'd forgotten, control, but I had no idea what kind of fire I was about to light, because revenge. It was only just beginning, asterisk. I'd always told myself I would never let Jessica's face haunt me again, but it did every time I closed my eyes. Her laugh at brunch, the way she'd flip her hair when Mark praised her spreadsheets, the way she hugged me and then kissed him 2 minutes later. I'd felt stupid for believing her, David, and I set a plan. Quiet surveillance. Betrayals. Interviews dressed like coincidences. I learned to breathe slow, let the camera catch the flashes of guilt I wanted to see, and keep my face calm when it wanted to scream. We followed Jessica to a townhouse on King Street, an address she'd always called mine someday. We watched as she let herself in through a private side door. Daniel's car was in the driveway. They moved like a pair who shared everything: keys, secrets, a code. Not lovers in a fleeting romance, partners in a scheme. That night, I sat in my car across the street and listened to the radio like background noise while my hands shook around a paper cup of coffee. I pictured Jessica laughing with Mark, telling him I was naive. I pictured Daniel counting bills in a room with blinds drawn. I pictured Mark's face as the light left it. David called me with a soft beep. We've got audio from the townhouse, he said. Daniel's voice. Jessica's voice. Talk about the transfer. My skin went cold. Play it. He transferred the file to my phone. Their voices were low, intimate, criminal, and complacent. I didn't need to hear every word to know what they'd been doing for months. Forging signatures, redirecting vendor payments, creating shell companies. And then toward the end of the clip, Jessica laughed in a way that sounded like triumph. Once Mark's gone, everything's ours, she said. We'll wipe the rest clean. My chest tightened. You heard that, right? I whispered. My voice sounded small in the leather seat. David's response was a whisper too. Not everything. There's one ledger they couldn't touch. It's encrypted, stored on a drive Mark kept hidden. It lists every off-book transaction he made. If we get that, we expose them. The next day I confronted Jessica, but not like a woman screaming in a church. I walked up to her at a charity luncheon, smiled, and told her how genuinely sorry I was for my loss. I kept my tone light, as if grief had softened me. She hugged me like a sister. Inside, my hands were nails digging into bone. She leaned in and whispered, I'd be careful, Sarah. People talk. Hers were flat, threatened, or maybe ashamed. Either way, the mask didn't slip. That night, I sat on the hood of my car and stared at the stars, pretending not to plan. I replayed Danielle's voice in my head, Jessica's laugh in my ears. I promised myself under a sky that suddenly felt less indifferent that I wouldn't just take their money. I would take their dignity, expose every lie, make sure the world knew the real names behind their smiles. They thought they were untouchable. They thought I was broken. They were right about one thing. I was broken. But broken things can be sharpened, and I was ready to cut. Asterisk. David closed the file and looked at me like I was a live wire. You don't understand how deep this goes, he said. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made my chest ache. We'd been moving fast too fast, chasing bank ledgers and secret emails. We had audio. We had a paper trail. But what we didn't have was safety. You mean danger? I asked. My hands were folded tight in my lap. I could feel the memory of the night I slept in my car like a bruise. Vulnerable, exposed. He leaned forward. People who launder money and dodge taxes don't like exposure. They get violent. They intimidate. They hire people to do their dirty work. The word hire landed like a stone. I pictured a shadowy figure at the edge of a parking lot, a slammed trunk, a message left on my windshield. My pulse clicked faster. So what do we do? I asked. I wanted to sound fearless. My voice broke a little. We go public. We call the police. We hand everything over. David shook his head. Not yet. The police will lock down the assets, but they'll also alert anyone involved. If Jessica and Danielle are connected to a larger network, if there are shell companies and offshore partners, then the moment we go public, we trigger a reaction. They'll cut ties in ways that bury evidence, or they'll move to silence people who know too much. I felt sick. So we do nothing? No, he said sharply. We move smarter. We build airtight proof. We document chain of custody. We get a forensics team to mirror the drives, preserve metadata. We make sure the evidence can't be destroyed or dismissed as tampered. He pushed a list across the desk. Names, contacts, a forensic lab in Atlanta. A private investigator who'd worked undercover for 10 years. It looked like a strategy pulled from a thriller. You want me to trust strangers with my life, I said. To hand over pieces of my worst days to people I barely know. His eyes were steady. I'm not asking you to trust them blindly. I'm asking you to trust the process. And to trust me. I remembered his face in my car that first day. Calm, complicated, a small lighthouse in a storm. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe him. But there was a line I wasn't ready to cross. Promise me one thing, I said. If they come for me, if Jessica or Daniel get desperate, promise me you'll tell me first. He hesitated and then nodded. I promise. That night, I left the office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since the divorce papers taped to my fridge. I also left with fear that wrapped around my throat like a second scarf. I hired the forensics team. They came in quiet, collected drives, cloned them, marked timestamps. They worked like surgeons. Every step felt like casting a safety net. But as the evidence stacked up, someone began moving on a different track. A message slid under my apartment door one morning, no signature. 4 words written in block letters, stop or else. My hands trembled as I read it. I felt the old humiliation when Mark left without a word crawl back under my skin. Only this time humiliation came wrapped in threat. They wanted me to be small again. They wanted my fear to keep me quiet. They had no idea what I'd already lost. And what I was willing to risk. Asterisk, that note stop or else didn't scare me. Not the way they hoped it would. It ignited something. I sat at my kitchen table for hours that night, staring at those 4 words, remembering every sleepless night in my car, every fake smile Jessica gave me, every business trip Mark swore was innocent. They'd taken my home, my marriage, my reputation. Now, I was going to take everything from them. I called David. It's time, I said. He hesitated. Time for what? For revenge. There was silence on the line, then a quiet, almost reluctant exhale. Sarah, whatever you're planning, don't cross the line. We're close to real evidence, don't risk the case. But I wasn't thinking like a lawyer. I was thinking like a woman who'd been used and discarded. I'm not breaking the law, I said. I'm just making sure they choke on their own lies over the next few days. I started putting my plan together carefully. Surgically. Step 1. Exposure. Jessica and Danielle's company, Price and Carter Consulting, was already on the verge of landing a multi-million-dollar government contract. If someone were to anonymously leak their offshore account trail to the federal bidding committee, well, let's just say the contract would vanish overnight. So that's exactly what I did, using the files David's team had cloned. I sent the encrypted proof of fraudulent transfers and signed. Untraceable to the agency. Step 2. Isolation. Jessica thrived on power. She loved being adored, respected, feared. So I went after her image. I contacted to old colleagues, people she'd burned years ago, and fed them a few truthful rumors. Within a week, whispers spread through her social circles like wildfire. She was under investigation. She'd been stealing from her own company. She'd betrayed her lover, her friends started ghosting her. Her business partners stopped returning calls. Step 3. Revelation. I waited until she was desperate enough to reach out and she did. It was a Tuesday night. My phone lit up with her name. Sarah, she said, her voice trembling. You don't understand what's happening. Someone's trying to ruin me. I almost laughed. You mean the way you tried to ruin me? Her breath hitched. I didn't save it. You and Daniel deserve each other. Her tone changed sharper now. You think this makes you better than me? Mark didn't love you. Sarah, he pitied you. You were his charity case. That cut deep. But I didn't flinch. Maybe, I said softly. But at least I'm not the reason he's dead. Silence. For a full 10 seconds, she said nothing. I could hear her breathing, fast and panicked. Then she whispered, You don't know what you're talking about. I think I do, I said. And so do the investigators who'll be knocking on your door any day now. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From power. For the first time since the divorce, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the storm coming for them. And the thunder was just beginning, because what I was about to uncover next would destroy everything they'd built. I stopped counting nights. The plan blurred into routine. Research at dawn. Calls at noon. Quiet meetings after midnight. The forensics team worked like ghost cloning drives, pulling metadata, tracing IPs. David handled the legal crosshairs. I handled the rest. They underestimated me. That was their first mistake. I started small. A bogus vendor invoice here. A redirected payment there. Nothing illegal on my end, only a clever nudge in the right direction. I leaked a breadcrumb to a reporter who loved corporate corruption stories. He called. He asked questions. He smelled blood. Within 48 hours, a freelance journalist had an appetite and a byline. Then I baited Daniel. He was the more cautious one. Calm in public, cold in private. I posed as an investor interested in a consulting partnership. We met at a cafe that smelled like burnt espresso and regret. I wore sunglasses and a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Daniel talked numbers. He talked growth strategies. He talked about protecting assets and legacy. He never once looked at the woman across the table. He didn't have to. I let him lead. I let him say the things he thought only his ally would hear. When he mentioned an offshore account and the exact code name Mark used for the ledger, I pretended to scribble notes. After the meeting, I slipped him a card that connected him to a fake LLC. I'd set up one that funneled to a monitored account. He called the number. He sent an encrypted email. He revealed more than he knew. We recorded everything. Not to entrap him illegally, but to build a pattern. He was sloppy. Too comfortable. He was arrogant. And arrogance leaves fingerprints. Next, I played Jessica. She responded to pressure the way a pearl oysters to sand. She formed grit that turned into pearl or poison. Her phone calls became frantic. She texted Daniel at odd hours. She deleted messages and then panicked. The more I pushed, the thinner the armor became. At 2 in the morning, I watched live feeds from a private investigator's van. Daniel pacing in his study, lights off, cigarette burn in the ashtray. Jessica whispering into a phone, voice raw. I watched them make mistakes. I watched them panic. I watched cracks widen. Then I passed the pattern to the right places. Not the police yet, but to people who could make their world tilt. A vendor who'd been cheated went public. A subcontractor who'd been paid in cash filed a complaint to a regulatory board. The reporter published a short piece, nothing conclusive, but a splinter that pried at their foundations. They started calling each other names in private. They suspected a mole. They tightened the circle. They began to betray one another. It was beautiful and brutal, but I still didn't have absolute proof of murder. I had motive. I had greed. I had confession fragments. I had a ledger that could be the smoking gun. Yet the night before the transfer was set to clear, someone tried to break into the storage unit where the drive was hidden. I almost lost everything in a heartbeat. I didn't sleep that night. I sat beside the drive like a mother guiding a child. I thought of Mark, not the monster he'd been, but the man who'd wrapped my life in lies. I thought of the woman who pretended to mourn. I thought of the man who smiled in court. And I promised myself one thing. When the truth came out, it wouldn't just ruin them. It would expose the cost of betrayal, because karma has a way of finding ledgers. *, the drive hummed under my fingers like a heartbeat. I'd stared at it so long I could read the scratches on its casing. It was small, unremarkable until you knew what it held: the ledger, the timestamps, the breadcrumb trail of every off-the-books transfer Mark had made. It was the map to their lies. David and the forensics team worked for days. They moved like careful surgeons, no theatrics, only patience. I watched them mirror drives, pull metadata, and reconstruct file edits down to the second. They found something I didn't expect: a series of deleted messages between Mark and someone else. Not Jessica, not Danielle. A different number, a different voice, a name I didn't recognize. My throat tightened. "Who is it?" I asked. David swallowed. "Unknown." But the calls spiked 3 days before the crash. There's also a timestamp GPS ping near the crash site at 12:03 a.m. And this, he pointed to a photo on the screen. It was grainy, taken from a traffic camera. A van, night, headlights, the license plate blurred. Someone had tried to erase the footage, but the forensics team recovered a fragment. I leaned closer. The van was heading toward the bend where Mark's car had gone off the road. My hand shook. Furious, betrayed, utterly raw old feelings fused with new ones. We pulled the autopsy report. Toxicology came back clean. No drugs, no alcohol. But the mechanic's notes were different. "Brake line compromised," it said. "Cut from the inside, someone had either sabotaged the car or had intimate access to it right before the crash." I stared at the words until they blurred. Sabotage, access, opportunity, motive. Jessica and Daniel had opportunity. They had motive. They'd been pushing for control. They'd changed beneficiaries, shuffled accounts, and whispered about what happens when he's gone. But the unknown number and the van suggested a third player, someone hired, someone professional. I thought of the note under my door: "Stop or else." Someone wanted to shut me up. Someone wanted the ledger gone. Someone wanted Mark gone. The pieces started to fit into a picture I didn't want to complete. I called Jessica. I wanted to see how she'd respond. She told me, in a voice that trembled like paper, that she'd been at home the night Mark died alone, watching old movies. She said Daniel had left town on business. Her alibi sounded thin and rehearsed. She cried in a way that sounded more like calculation than grief. Daniel's phone went straight to voicemail. His office line was dead. When he finally answered, his voice was flat. "We're being targeted," he said. "Someone's framing us." His claim felt like a confession and a defense at once. Then the unthinkable happened. The reporter who'd been nibbling at their heels published a piece connecting the van rental tied to an intermediary with a security company owned by someone who'd quietly done work for Mark's firm. The name flashed across my screen and felt surgical. Price and Carter had contracted a freelance security consultant, someone with access to vehicles and tools. I felt relieved and devastated at the same time. Relieved because the trail was narrowing. Devastated because the truth was uglier than I'd imagined. Mark's death was not just greed and affair. It was cold, planned, and executed. And whoever had orchestrated it had been closer than I thought. The ledger hummed in my bag like a small, accusing heart. We were close. So close I could taste it. But close didn't mean finished. The last threads were knotted in a place I couldn't reach alone. If this was murder, and I believed it was, then the next move would have to be surgical. Not to maim, but to expose. To make the world watch as their empire collapsed. Because some people think karma is a quiet shove. But sometimes karma is a slow, inevitable demolition. Asterisk. I remember how my hands shook the morning everything moved from plan to action. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the sweet, terrible knowledge that I could make them pay for the house, for the lies, for Mark's blood on their hands. David and I had one advantage: patience. We were legal ants, slow but relentless. The forensics had given us enough to point fingers. The reporter had given us traction. Now we needed a spectacle, something the public couldn't ignore. Step 1, the hearing. We petitioned for an emergency injunction to freeze Price and Carter's assets pending investigation. The judge signed it. The firm's accounts were frozen. Contracts stalled. Phones that used to ring constantly went dead. Jessica's smile cracked on live camera as investors asked questions she couldn't answer. I watched her on television, mascara streaked, saying she was cooperating fully. It was a lie that sounded like rust. Step 2, exposure. We released the ledger to a major investigative outlet under the reporter's byline. It hit the internet like a blast. Screenshots, redactions, highlighted transfers, names connected to shell companies, photographs of luxury purchases paid for with laundered money. The comments poured in outrage, disbelief, mockery. Jessica's curated life unraveled in public, thread by thread. Step 3. Confrontation. I wanted them to feel the humiliation I'd felt. Not hidden threats. Not whispers. Public collapse. I scheduled a deposition and made sure every key player was there: Jessica, Daniel, to board members, and the man who'd filed the security contract, Elliot Crane. A freelance fixer with a history David had dug up. He'd run vans before. He'd done jobs for people who paid well and asked fewer questions. When Elliot walked into the room, he didn't look like a murderer. He looked like a man who did unpleasant things for a paycheck. He tried to plead ignorance. He said he'd been hired as clean-up. He said he didn't know who he was cleaning for. He said a name that froze me, someone I hadn't expected. Someone with a public face and a polite handshake. Daniel snapped. You're lying. He lunged forward too fast, too raw. Security held him back. Jessica shrieked like a woman seeing the last of her empire fall into ash. Under questioning, Elliot's calm cracked. He mentioned a transfer. He mentioned a meeting at a marina the week before the crash. He mentioned a man's briefcase, heavy with cash. He mentioned a tip, make it look like an accident. The room grew cold. Even the stenographer's fingers trembled. I thought of Mark's smile when he signed papers. I thought of my own signature on a stupid prenup. I thought of the note under my door telling me to stop. When the deposition ended, cameras swarmed. I walked out into light that felt like heat. People shouted questions. I answered one. Did you expect this? I looked at Jessica, at Daniel, at Elliot, who tried to disappear into a black car. I felt nothing but a hollow kind of calm. No, I said. I expected justice. They're experts at pretending. They're bad at surviving the truth. And truth, when you hit it with patience, precision. And a public stage hurts in a new way. But even after Elliot broke, even after confessions started seeping out like blood through fabric, a final piece remained. A name, a last signature. The one person who could stitch the rest together and send them all to jail. And I was holding the thread. Asterisk. The courtroom smelled like stale air and anxiety. Cameras lined the back row. Microphones craned forward like vultures, waiting for a soundbite. Jessica sat at the defense table, all sharp cheekbones and trembling fingers. Daniel sat beside her, jaw locked tight, eyes empty. I sat alone. No lawyer this time, just me. The woman they'd left for dead. The woman they'd underestimated. The judge entered. The sound of the gavel hit like thunder. Or eyes. This was it. Months of humiliation, loss, and sleepless nights all boiling down to this final act. David had done his job. The FBI had followed the ledger's trail to a web of offshore accounts and insurance fraud. The crash wasn't an accident, it was the clean-up. Mark had discovered their scheme. He'd planned to expose them. But before he could, Jessica and Daniel had hired Elliot Crane to stage an accident, except Elliot had kept evidence. Payment logs, messages, enough to bury them. When the prosecution presented the evidence, you could hear the air shift. The judge leaned forward, eyebrows raised. As the messages flashed on screen, Daniel, we can't let him talk. Jessica, then make sure he doesn't. The jury looked disgusted. One woman actually shook her head. Jessica's lawyer tried to spin it as grief-fueled frustration, but it was over. They were done. When the verdict came, it was swift and brutal, guilty on all counts, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Jessica sobbed as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. Daniel's composure shattered. He shouted something about loyalty, betrayal, and how it wasn't supposed to end this way. But it did. It always does when you build your fortune on lies and think no one will ever dig deep enough to find the bones. The estate. Mark's estate was released to me as the rightful heir per his final codicil. The same one Jessica had tried to destroy. $38 million. I stared at the number on the statement and felt nothing. Money couldn't fix the sleepless nights or the years of manipulation. But it could build something new. So I bought the old house back, the one they'd stolen from me. Rebuilt it brick by brick, room by room, like therapy in motion. I turned part of it into a shelter for women starting over, divorced, homeless, broken, but unbowed. Women like I once was. Sometimes, when I stand by the window, I can almost hear Mark's voice in the quiet. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's closure. But I whisper back anyway, I'm free now. I didn't destroy Jessica or Danielle with fire or vengeance. I destroyed them with truth. That's the most terrifying weapon of all because truth doesn't just burn your enemies. It exposes you too. And I had to face who I became to survive. If you're watching this, tell me in the comments, would you have stopped when they warned you? Or would you have gone all the way, like I did? Because sometimes, revenge isn't about getting even. It's about reclaiming your story.